Helen Keller, The Story of My Life, Chapter 21, Part 2. It seems strange that my first reading of Shakespeare would have left so many unpleasant memories. The bright, gentle, fanciful plays, the ones I like best now, appeared not to have impressed me at first, perhaps because they reflected the habitual sunshine and gaiety of a child's life. But there is nothing more capricious than the memory of a child, what it will hold and what it will lose. I have since read Shakespeare's plays many times and know parts of them by heart, but I cannot tell which of them I like best. My delight is in them as varied as my moods. The little songs and sonnets have a meaning for me as fresh and wonderful as the dramas, but, with all my love for Shakespeare, it is often weary work to read all the meanings into his lines which critics and commentators have given them. I used to try to remember their interpretations, but they discouraged and vexed me, so I made a secret compact with myself not to try any more. This compact I have only just broken in my study of Shakespeare under Professor Kittredge. I know there are many things in Shakespeare and in the world that I do not understand, and I am glad to see veil after veil lift gradually, revealing new realms of thoughts and beauty. Next to poetry, I love history. I have read every historical work that I have been able to lay my hands on, from a catalogue of dry facts and drier dates to Green's impartial, picturesque history of the English people. From Freeman's History of Europe to Emerton's Middle Ages. The first book that was any real sense of value was Swinton's World History, which I received on my 13th birthday. Though I believe it is no longer considered valid, yet I have kept it ever since as one of my treasures. From it I learned how the races of men spread from land to land and built great cities, how a few great rulers, earthly titans, put everything under their feet, and with a decisive word opened the gates of happiness for millions and closed them upon millions more. How different nations pioneered in art and knowledge and broke ground for the mightier growths of coming ages. How civilizations underwent, as it were, the holocaust of a degenerate age, and rose again like the phoenix among the nobler sons of the north, and how by liberty, tolerance, and education the great and the wise have opened the way for the salvation of the whole world. I know she uses the word Holocaust. This was written in the 1800s. In my college reading, I become somewhat familiar with French and German literature. The German puts strength before beauty and truth before convention, both in life and in literature. There is a vehement sledgehammer vigor about everything that he does. When he speaks, it is not to impress others, but because his heart would burst if he did not find an outlet for the thoughts that burn in his soul. Then, too, there is in German literature a fine reserve, which I like, but its chief glory is the recognition I find in it the redeeming potency of woman's self-sacrificing love, that thought that pervades all German literature and is mystically expressed as Goethe's Faust. All things transitory, but as symbols are sent, earth insufficiently, here grows to event. The indescribable, here it is done. The woman's soul leads us upward and on. Of all the French writers that I have read, I like Molière and Racine best. There are fine things in Balzac and passages in Mirabeau which strike one like a keen blast of sea air. Alfred de Musset is impossible. I admire Victor Hugo. I appreciate his genius, his brilliancy, his romanticism, though he does not one of his literary passions. But Hugo and Goethe and Schiller and all the great poets of all great nations are interpreters of eternal things, and my spirit reverently follows them into the regions where beauty and truth and goodness are one. I am afraid I have written too much about my book friends, and yet I have mentioned only the authors I love most, and from this fact one might easily suppose that my circle of friends was very limited and undemocratic, which would be a very wrong impression. I like many writers for many reasons. Carlyle for his ruggedness and scorn of shams. Wordsworth, who teaches the oneness of man and nature. I find an exquisite pleasure in the oddities and surprises of Hood, and Herrick's quaintness, and in the palpable scent of lily and rose in his verses. I like Whittier for his enthusiasms and moral rectitude. I knew him, and the gentle remembrance of our friendship doubles the pleasure I have in reading his poems. I love Mark Twain. Who does not? The gods, too, loved him, and put into his heart all manner of wisdom Then fearing lest he should become a pessimist, they spanned his mind with a rainbow of love and faith. I like Scott for his freshness, dash, and large honesty. I love all writers whose minds, like Lowell's, bubble up in the sunshine of optimism, fountains of joy and goodwill, with occasionally a splash of anger, and here and there a healing spray of sympathy and pity. Reminds me of somebody. She's talking about writers. She's describing writers so eloquently. In a word, literature is my utopia. Here I am disfranchised. No barrier of the senses shut me out from the sweet, gracious discourse of my book friends. They talk to me without embarrassment or awkwardness. The things I have learned and the things I have been taught seem of ridiculously little importance compared with their large loaves and heavenly charities. I would say that's a great description. The second part of chapter 21 was a great description by Helen Keller of writers. I wouldn't say it's every writer, but you know, I love all writers whose minds, like Lowell's, bubble up in the sunshine of optimism, fountains of joy and goodwill, with occasionally a splash of anger here and there, healing spray of sympathy and pity. Most writers are manic depressants. At least this one is. So that was Helen Keller, chapter 21. My name is Gregory Brandt. Like I said, I'm also a writer. I wrote a book called Gonzo Education. If that book isn't read by me on this channel, then it should be there. I'm reading this first, but I do plan on reading that one. And since these are becoming popular after the fact, it's probably there as you're watching this right now. So feel free to check out my other channels, and have a nice day.